Sadie. Come on.
Hey everyone, Troy Brown here, Big Timber Entertainment, and you are watching the Music Business Game Plan. And as always, with me is my wonderful, talented, and really good beer drinking partner, Mark Oliverius. Mark, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, Troy. How are you, brother?
I'm doing fantastic, and we've got a great guest on here this week. Looking forward to this. Take it away.
My old friend, Jerry Kimbrough.
All right. Yeah.
Jerry Kimbrough in the house. We go back, I don't know, 60 years. No, not that far.
No, wait a minute.
But, Jerry has played on a lot of sessions for me, but he's played on countless sessions in town. He's one of the best. I know he's extremely humble and very, very, he doesn't admit things, but he's played on a ton of sessions and he's very gifted and covers such a wide range. Jerry, I'm good. We'll get into your whole CV as we go on here, my friend.
Yeah,
I know you
just about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. I think you just came from a session, right?
No, I just came from walking the dog.
Walking the dog. Okay. Well,
that was a great song too. Back in the 60s, covered by Aerosmith.
So Jerry, we met back probably in the 90s, started working together in the 90s. And of course I knew Miss Diane before I knew you. She was working with
going?
Sony. Well, no. Diffie? Yeah, I was with Diffie. And she was Troy. Let me straighten this out a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about my wife.
She was coming in with Sony and running some rehearsals and stuff. And, so that was where I met her, and she was a sweetheart. And she used to say, "You ought to check my husband's guitar playing out." And I, of course, did and got hooked. I got hooked on some Kimbrough. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing very well.
Talk to me. What's the week been like? What's the week going to be like this week with everything, with your varied schedule?
Oh gosh, let's see. Got a demo session tomorrow afternoon, and again Friday. And I've got a leadership music meeting actually tomorrow morning. Kind of a quiet week, a little bit of teaching. I teach at Vanderbilt, so I'll be there Friday morning. So yeah, just a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Is this typically a quieter season right now in session play? Jerry, how does that work throughout the year? Does it pick up, get busy? How does that work?
Well, I mean, in the old days, it would be quieter in the summer because artists would be out on tour, so there would be, these days, it's hard to read. There's so much very small in-house production things going on. I do some here at home. I have, a number of clients that I either do work for them at home or go to their home studio. So it just kind of comes and goes. It's hard to read. It used to be much more predictable, but not so much, at least not so much for me anymore.
Yeah. Jerry, you played on, countless sessions. And how'd you break into the Nashville scene?
I lied.
Well, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah. No, I was hanging out with a friend of mine who was a drummer. We were both brand new in town. I've been in town for a year or so. And this is, we're going back in the day here. When, if you were cool, you had a pager, and my friend, the drummer, had a pager. And we had absolutely nothing to do. So we were hanging out. There used to be a Haagen-Dazs ice cream shop on West End, and we were hanging out down there one afternoon, and his pager went off, and he went to a payphone. A payphone is a thing that used to be like a phone on never mind. He went to a payphone and called the number on the pager, and it was a publisher asking him if he would come and play drums. He'd heard about him and said, hey, so and so recommended you. Would you come and play drums on this session? He said, well, sure. And the guy said, and by the way, do you know any acoustic guitar players? I need an acoustic guitar player for this session. And he puts his hand over the phone and says, looks at me, do you play acoustic guitar? And I'm like, yes. I play acoustic guitar. I owned an acoustic guitar, and there were things that I knew how to play just from my background as a performer, but I had like zero idea of what it meant to play acoustic guitar in Nashville on a recording session, like zero. So showed up to this session, and before the first song was over, I was sure that my career was just over. My first session ever in Nashville, and I was going down circling the drain. There was a great electric player on that session, a longtime legendary guy named Kenny Mims.
Oh, man.
And Kenny came into the little booth where I was struggling to figure out how to play this, just basic rhythm. And he closes the door behind me and says, man, can I help you, man? And by that time, I was kind of starting to figure it out. And I was, too proud to admit what an idiot I was. So I said, no, man, I think I got it. And, I managed to get it done. And amazingly enough, I literally went home and thought, well, it's time to pack the pickup and head back to Florida. But about 10 days later, the same people called me again. And I went and did it again. But I learned enough to know that I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So I got real serious about learning how to play straightforward rhythm guitar on a Nashville session.
Yeah.
Well, you were coming out of that University of Miami, I'm assuming the jazz program.
Yeah, it was called Studio Music and Jazz, but they didn't really have a Nashville angle.
Right. Well, that was,
all the teachers in Miami were real caught up in like the Bee Gees were super big then.
You're right.
So like almost the entire faculty played on all the Bee Gees records and anything that came into Criteria, which was the rock and pop artists from all over the world, but nobody did any country down there. So there was no orientation towards that. Don't get me wrong. I got a lot out of that education. I'm grateful every day for it. But I walked into Nashville way more clueless than I was. I was so clueless I didn't know how clueless I was. Okay, how's that?
That's the best way to be.
Yeah.
Well, I had to, it was like sink or swim. Ride or die. So I had to learn.
Yeah.
I got my ass handed to me more than once, but I learned.
Yeah, that's a great story, Jerry. And so you also teach, taught at Vanderbilt, MTSU. And what advice would you give a younger musician that wants to break in as a session musician? How do they go about that?
Well, it's first of all, I try to let them know about my own blind spots when I was in their position, like the story I just told you.
Yeah.
And try to, outline some of the basic skills they need, not all of which are musical. In fact, people skills are really paramount, being able to get along with even the most hard to get along with people, sometimes, you're there. If you're there to play on a recording session, you're there to make the project good and make the client happy. And if you're playing your coolest stuff and they don't like it, well, then you just smile and say, let's try this. You just give them something else. As we say, and I'm sure you've heard this on this show before, beauty is in the ear of the employer. So,
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Don't get all bent out of shape if somebody doesn't like what you're doing or your sound or whatever. be grateful. Just remind yourself that you're getting an education in that moment, and you need to be flexible. And obviously, you have a blind spot and more to learn. And be gracious about it. Whether the people you're working for are gracious or not, be gracious, and they won't forget it. Be easy to get along with. Pay attention. Try to live close to where the music biz is. Like, there was a famous guitar player that some of your older listeners would remember, named Tommy Tedesco. He was an LA guy, and he had a great
Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, Wrecking Crew. And he had a great book out that I really pored over when I was younger. And one suggestion that he made in the book was, when you're moving to a music town, and I think in his case, he kind of had LA in mind, but when you're moving to a music town, live close to where the music is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I encourage people to do that. Like, some of the kids at MTSU, or, they're like, oh, I'm going to live in Murfreesboro. It's close to Nashville. I'm like, no, it's not close to Nashville, because if you have been pounding the pavement and hanging out and meeting people and trying to get called for some work, and somebody calls you at 9:20 in the morning, their guitar player they had hired has the flu and can't be there, and can you come and sub? You're not going to be there from Murfreesboro in 30 minutes. You need to be somewhere where you can be available. Mm-hmm. So, just kind of practical things like that. If you're either talented enough or, like me, vacuous enough to have moved to Nashville wanting to be in the music business, then, a lot of the basic music stuff, you kind of, at least your compass is pointed in the right direction. But oftentimes people get so pointed in that direction that they lose sight of just the personal part.
Yeah. Yeah. When you building a little bit on your professorship, what excites you about the future of music when you're working with students that you're working with these days? Do you see they're getting it, and do you see they're going to take this to another level? How do you see it, Jerry?
Some of them definitely, and at the end of the day, it's a creative endeavor. And, they see things differently from me. Yeah. And I don't go about it. I mean, I have a lot to share, from being educated in school. And I tell people I did my graduate studies on the streets of Music Row. So between my school and my experience and my mistakes and my successes, whatever they might be, I have that to share with them, which I happily do. But they have their own perspective on creativity. And I'll see somebody doing, being creative and making decisions that I probably wouldn't make. And I have to just kind of step back and say, you know what? I'm not them and they're not me. And their world is so different from the world that I came up in the music. Yeah. I need to let them know where the guardrails are, but otherwise, don't put them on a leash. Just let them go, and let them learn from their mistakes, like I did mine, like you did yours, Ollie. Yeah. I don't think anybody who's teaching should try to teach people how to avoid the pitfalls and the mistakes necessarily, because those are some of the most priceless learning experiences. Right. You're just, like I said, you're trying to guide people and show them the guardrails and give them basic information that will be functional for them. My perspective is this: when I'm in the classroom, usually one-on-one, but there's a couple of classes at MTSU. The MTSU has a songwriting program, and Odie Blackman, the legendary songwriter, tapped me to teach basic guitar for songwriters down there, because some of them, they might play piano but not guitar, and he feels like it's a skill they need. So I have kids take that class that have never played guitar, and I've got 16 weeks to get them playing. I forgot where I was going with that, but there are certain things that I want them to do, but I also want them to feel free to do things their way.
Yeah.
Make a mistake, okay, they'll learn from it. You know.
Yeah.
Well, the guardrails, you talk about the guardrails, they're wide. The guardrails now. I mean, back in the day, it was basic, the whole country genre back in the 90s it's a whole different animal today. And there's so much pop and so much sampled stuff. And we all program and we all do a hybrid workflow on everything. And it's, you can't really, the guys coming up and the gals coming up with the new stuff is the new stuff that hooks, could be the riff that hooks the song and makes it a hit,
Totally. And so, I know where I was going. When I'm teaching somebody at Vanderbilt or MTSU, these are like, I call them my side hustles. I'm not a full-time teacher any place, but these places sought me out and wanted me to participate, so I do. When I'm in that context, my perspective is I'm trying to educate people for success in the classroom out there.
Yeah.
They may be in a class with me. I'm trying to educate them on how to learn and survive in that classroom. I'll point to Music Row and say, I want to get you ready for that classroom, because that's one hell of a classroom.
Yeah. When were you?
And I certainly don't have all the answers. I can just, like I said,
Yeah.
guardrails, general stuff,
Mm-hmm. When were you at MTSU?
When was I?
When did you start teaching there?
Odie ran into me one day and put his finger in my chest. You need to come help me. Like, what? Are you moving a refrigerator or something? No, I'm starting a songwriting program at MTSU, and I need somebody to help these kids learn to play guitar. That was probably 10 years ago, maybe 12 ago.
Yeah. Did you have Hardy by any chance as a student? He went to MTSU.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Wow, what a songwriter that kid is.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah. Well, whoever had him, they did well. So
yeah. Now there's a lot of talented kids down there, man. Let me tell you that. They come from all over the world. Actually, I've had kids seek out the program at MTSU from Germany and Australia. It's fantastic.
It seems to me there's some songwriters that really do well with co-writers, like to have co-writers around them, bringing that energy. Some, some in history haven't, some of the best. Is there a best way when you're teaching a songwriting class, do you get into that at all, Jerry?
Well, I don't actually teach these songwriting classes.
Okay.
I know that they do a lot of collaborative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they definitely preach collaboration, because if you can write a great song on your own, that's great. If you're a Don Schlitz or a Vince Gill, but even those guys, Don Schlitz wrote with any number of great writers to get his songs done. So with maybe the exception of The Gambler, which it only needed one guy to write that. But no, I think at MTSU they're very much into collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reality, and it's a very reality-based program, and it's not for the faint of heart. They put people really through their paces in those classes. My class is just learning how to play guitar, and we cover a lot of ground. We go from zero to some pretty complicated finger picking and rhythm playing in the course of a semester, because that's the stuff that I didn't have a clue about really in a professional, practical sense when I moved here. So
I think I've got two patterns in my finger picking, and my fingers still get stuck in the strings every once in a while with those two patterns that I have. So
a lot of good. I bet there's been many a good song written with those two patterns. So,
I tell you what, it comes down to time, doesn't it? it comes down to that metronome and
It's
being
about-
able to go from 1 to 4 and 1 to 4 and 1 to 4 and do it in rhythm and do it locked to time.
Yeah, and
tempo.
locked is important, but even when it's locked, it has to feel good.
Yeah.
You know, over the since moving to Nashville, I've become more and more convinced that feel is really paramount. I mean, you can get away with a poor choice of note, whether it's the melody to a song or the notes of a solo or whatever. But if it feels good, it took me a while to catch on to that. But man, if it feels good, something that feels good apologizes for a lot of what might be thought of as technical problems. How many great records have we heard that, might not have been perfect from, the production standpoint or the musical standpoint, but they felt so good that you just couldn't stop listening to them.
Yeah.
Mark,
So-
that's my problem with finger picking. I've gotten 1 to 2 and I'm working on 3 now. So I got to get to 4 apparently to get a little bit better at this.
No, you're pretty solid, Troy. You're pretty solid.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's good to be, exacting and consistent and locked and all that. We all strive for that. But there have been times when things have seemed kind of loosey-goosey that just worked so well, you dare not touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jerry, when, what really separates session players? You played on so many of these things. What separates the elites from, the guys who don't get called very often or won't get called again? What makes the difference?
I think that the people who, or at least I like to think that the people who are successful in that endeavor have a much broader frame of reference than those who don't. They're more musical.
Mm-hmm.
They might be a piano player or a guitar player or a fiddle player, but they're beyond letting the instrument play them, and they're more able to access the huge possibilities of music by playing their instrument. They're on a good day, they're not caught up in the minutia of how to play their instrument. They understand that on a genetic level, but their understanding of the broader possibilities of music is so much greater than the average person, and it just flows out of them.
Yeah.
And part of that is natural, part of it's instinct. Is there such a thing as musical talent? Yes. Some people have, like Elton John, kind of freakish musical talent. Some people like me, I grew up as a little boy, next to my mom singing in church, and I didn't realize at the time that I was getting ear training from listening to her. So, I don't have any like prodigious musical skills, but I was exposed to that at an early enough age that, it never really rose to the level of thought. It was just kind of there.
Yeah.
So people who have that kind of ability, those kind of instincts, they may not have prodigious physical skills, but they have great instincts, and they have a strong kind of personality, an identity that separates them from other people and might put its stamp on a particular song or a piece of work. I mean, look at somebody like Chris Lusinger and all the records he played on with Garth Brooks. Chris is like, a brilliant guitar player in that lane and in that vein. And, it was rightly so that he was on all those records because he was the right guy. He had the sound and the feel. What a feel Chris has.
Yeah.
It's a chemistry kind of thing.
And
Yeah.
you know what you talk about the feel and their personality, putting the stamp on it. We had a conversation a couple of podcasts ago, and I had walked into a studio one day and I heard one of the top piano players in this town had just doing some warm-ups, and it's like, my God, it was just like, you hear that. And well, and then I was listening to Gordon Mote the other day on his Christmas stuff, his solo Christmas pianos, and I called him. I mean, he's just exquisite, beautiful, and
Oh yeah.
but what it comes down to, you don't have to be able to play like Mozart. You have to be able to play. I mean, listen to a Clapton record. There's not a lot of technique other than the feel going on in those hits. And I think the whole thing about creating your own sound, how important is that as a player, do you think?
It's been important to the most successful session players of all time. You can, whether it's Carol Kay or Steve Lukather or Brent Mason. These people, they have that kind of musical identity where you can tell who it is in 2 notes, I mean, or like literally in 5 notes. You would know who those people are by their feel. James Jamerson, it's a long list of people like that who have such a strong identity, singular identity.
What does the technique?
The irony of it is, we all, to the extent that we get a strong personal identity in music, we get it by copying other people.
Right.
I mean, you can talk all day long about, no man, I do my own thing. I don't copy. Yeah, well, you didn't learn how to say mama and dada without copying. It's what humans do.
Do you think that technique drives? Should technique drive the personality of your playing, or should technique take a back seat to what's needed? I mean, does technique get in the way sometimes? Having so much technique, you can go big on everything, or does that hamper, or sometimes does that get in the way What's your take on that?
It gets in the way if you let it. I mean, you learn, if you're paying attention, that there's a time for that, and there's a time. Your job is to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you're going to try to play, your Kurt Rosenwinkel licks, this fantastic jazz guitar player that I'm a big fan of, but if you're going to try to play that on a Morgan Wallen record, you're done. That's just idiocy. If you're so good, then you should be expected to be able to dial it back,
right,
and play the 7 or 8 notes that matter, the thing that's right for the context.
Yeah. Jerry, I think we met in October. I came to a Ray Stevens show.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, and you were playing at that show.
Yeah, I've been playing with Ray for a long time.
Yeah, did I hear he's going to be up on stage again?
He is going to be playing again. Last year, he announced to the world that he's going to retire. And
yeah.
I mean, I get it. He's 86 years old, but he's got more energy than a box full of puppies.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's super smart, and he's super ornery and hard-headed. So I asked him the other day when he called and said, "You ready to do some more dates?" I'm like, I thought how are you going to spin this you told the whole world last year very publicly that you were going to retire. How are you going to spin that? Well, I changed my mind. I mean, that's just who he is. I mean, he's got his own theater. He's got his own everything. He's been so successful. So why not? He did have some health issues that I think had him running scared for a while, but apparently he's got that stuff more under control now. He's had COVID 3 times, I'm sure of, which is not good for anybody at any age, let alone when you're in your 70s and 80s. But
yeah,
No, I think he's getting back on his feet pretty well, and he's just hilarious. I mean, you go in there and you hear him play those songs and tell the stories about. He's just been there and done that, and worked with the greats. That classic Nashville A-Team group. He was a part of it. He played piano. He sang background vocals. He played anything that could be played. Actually, Ray played trumpet on some records, and he played percussion on some records. I mean, he's just a musical force.
Yeah, he's a musical genius. I've listened to his, some of his funny songs, but then to go into Everything Is Beautiful and Misty, and that is a very unique crossover, that he's done, and what he can do with his voice too, to make the instrumental sounds too is just phenomenal. I mean,
he's old school.
It was a great show. Yeah,
he's got the body language and the faces and the voices and so forth and so on. And Ray's brilliant, but it's not like he knows all there is to know about music. However, circling back to earlier in our conversation, he knows what's right.
Yeah.
He knows what's right for this song. He knows what's right for that song, and he's not too proud to do it.
It seems to me like he knows how to put butts in seats.
That he does. Yeah.
Did he and Reed play off each other? It's almost, almost like they carved that. Those two guys carved that niche, I'll say, with brilliant musicality, but they into the comedy realm, but still it grooved, man. And it was, Everything Is Beautiful. Like you say, Troy, that was just like, that is a spectacularly, I'm going to use exquisite again.
Yeah.
It's just heart-stoppingly beautiful, And
it's timeless, it's just timeless. When you listen to the lyrics, it's like, there's nothing about that lyric that couldn't and shouldn't apply today to your way of thinking today. So he came to town. He and Jerry Reed grew up together. They played together. That's right. They moved. Ray and Jerry Reed and Joe South,
Atlanta, right?
Were in a band in the Atlanta suburbs. They grew up together. They moved to Nashville together. Can you imagine those three guys? And I think that Jerry Reed had like a red Mustang or something. They all drove over here. And don't you know that was like a clown show?
Wow, that's so strong.
Crazy.
And you wonder, the starting as session players are starting. You wonder what their struggle was. You wonder how those cracks they got through and then built that session career and then jumped into the whole artist. Kind of like Charlie Daniels, the same thing with Charlie.
There you go, absolutely.
Jerry, is as creative as you are, and how consistent Ray's shows are, how do you balance this creative flow that you get into with the structure of a show like Ray's? Do you get a little bit of do you get a little leeway when you're doing the show, or is it just
that's about what it is. I get a little bit of leeway. He wants the hooks where he wants them, as well he should. But, little fills and things, or if there's a solo, I get to, interpret or kind of do my own thing. But I mean, he's a musician's musician. I mean, he knows what it's like to have an instrument. So, he doesn't want you to stand up and do, like your best Van Halen imitation, but he, within the context of what he's doing, he wants it to be good. And so I like somebody that sets the bar there. It challenges me. I've got 8 bars here, and I don't want to play the same thing I played yesterday or last week. What can I do that's a little bit different? He's game. He's game for that, as long as it's in the context of what's right, what's appropriate.
Yeah. We have a Mark Mary's on. You want to say hi to Mary?
Mary, how are you, Miss Mary Newland? Jerry, Mary and I grew up across the street from each other up in Upper Michigan back, 20 years ago. And and she is she's a rabid fan, and I don't mean that in a bad way. She's a good girl. Mary, good to hear from you, and fire away, Troy.
Mary says, "Hi guys. How do you teach people with really short, stubby fingers? I have to pull my finger to get it up for the higher chords." So, Jerry, if you've got a student with maybe shorter fingers, how do you work with them?
It's less about how I work with them than how they work with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The first thing you have to do is stop thinking of, my fingers are too short, my fingers are too long, I'm uncoordinated, I'm stupid, whatever that is. You have to let go of all that. And the second thing you do is more practical. Shop around for a guitar that's easy for you to play.
Mm-hmm.
It might be, in her case, it might be smaller than the typical guitar. Okay, so is there any shame in that? No, not if you learn to play it well and have fun learning to play it and have fun playing it. Who cares? What do you owe anybody? Get a guitar that's right for you. Go guitar shopping. There's such a thing as a 3/4 size guitar. It's not a big body, it's a smaller guitar. Or for women, for instance, Yamaha makes a guitar called the FS 800, which is a smaller body acoustic guitar that the shape of the body works well with women. I recommend it all the time to women who have similar issues,
Those are
but
great sounding guitars.
They are. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like for $300, you've got a guitar. You take care of it, will last you forever. Not that you might want to get a nicer guitar at some point, but it'll certainly serve you well. But golly, man, there's been, you think you've got problems with short fingers. What about somebody like, there are blind people who play the guitar. I've never even seen it. They have to make up their own topography, their own map for playing the guitar, their own style and technique and feel and everything. If you want to play it, you'll find a way to play it, and you will put the kind of self-serving excuses aside. Playing guitar is not hard. Learning to play guitar is not hard. It's tedious. It's challenging. It's awkward. The awkward is the number one word. It's an awkward thing, not just for your listener there, but for almost everybody. Some people get into it so naturally that they don't even realize it's awkward. But the thing you do is you just keep doing it until suddenly it ain't awkward no more. It feels natural. But for sure, nobody is born doing it. Short fingers, long fingers, whatever it might be. Nobody. You might have this musical skill or that musical skill, but it takes the biggest element in becoming a better guitar player is time and repetition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're willing to put in the time and do the repetitions of, playing this song or that song or this lick or that lick. Over time, you get better. If you're not willing to put in the time and the repetitions, that's okay if you're not willing to, but don't expect to get better. And I don't care how long your fingers are.
Yeah. Mary, I've got these short thumbs that I'm always jealous of the guitar players that it's like they've got long thumbs with two hinges on them that can wrap around that neck. And probably my strongest finger is my left thumb that has to rest behind the neck of that guitar and really contort my fingers to play bar chords too, in not wear my thumb while I'm playing bars. So Jerry, that's great advice.
Look,
play it the way you can.
If your attempts at playing guitar don't look like what you see on the internet, so what? Okay. If you want to play it, you'll find a way to play it. And if it doesn't look like what everybody else does, all the better. Who knows? You may be onto something that other people have been able to overlook.
Well, I'm working on that personally, Jerry. I don't think I've done
you and me both.
Yet.
You and me both.
Never stops, does it? Never stops.
It does. That's the good news and the bad news. You know, there's no end. Learning to play the guitar or any musical instrument. It's not like a video game where you get to the end and you throw it under the bed and go buy another video game. It just doesn't end. I mean, I've been playing guitar for a long time, and I spent a lot of time today just checking out different things and watching other players do things. What can I take away from that? It's fascinating. It's beautiful. It's enervating. It's great.
Well, Jerry, some of the that's just guys, this is a fantastic podcast here, I got to say. It's very, very information packed, and want to dig a little deeper into some of that information. Jerry, in town, so you came to town, and what other guitar players, you were talking about Mims, and what other guys did you have the opportunity, the old school guys, to work around before they passed on? What type of techniques or approaches were you able to pull from those, being around them?
Oh man, guys and these guys haven't passed on. Maybe they've moved on, but like Steve Gibson, fantastic guitar player, acoustic, electric, whatever. Already had a great track record, well established by the time I got to town. He was one of the guys. There was a guy named Brent Rowan. There was a fantastic acoustic player named Mark Cass Stevens.
Cass Stevens, yeah.
You know, there again, he played on all Garth's records. He played on, you know, I dare say 50% of the records that were done in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. Mark retired early, but wow, what a player. Jimmy Capps.
Yeah.
Jimmy, he's a guy that, you know, I do some subbing with. I'm on the sub list for the Opry staff band, and I get out there whenever they need me. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little, but Jimmy Capps got me started on that. He called me one day, asked me if I would sub for him, and they had approached me about it a couple of times about subbing, and I just thought, man, I'm just not that country guy. I mean, I can do it, but I'm not like a Brenton Mason or you know, somebody who's like amazing. Turns out you don't really have to be amazing. You just have to be reliable, and you have to do your homework, because there's a ton of music to learn for every show. So Jimmy got me involved in that. He was very gracious to me early on. I guess partly because of my schooling background, I got into like orchestra dates and television shows kind of weirdly early in my career. And so here I was, this you know newer guy in town, and Jimmy was so gracious to me. And here's a guy that even when I moved to town had already been playing on the Opry for decades, and you know, played with just every major legit country artist there was. And what a great player, you know, country, jazz, acoustic guitar, whatever. All the guys that influenced me wore many hats, which is kind of what I do. I'm not particularly good at anything, but I'm pretty good at a few things, you know. I can pick up the slack in a number of places. I'm not going to burn your house down just like, you know, with flaming chops on any day, but I can get in there and contribute, and I can contribute in a positive way. So, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
But those guys were my models around here. And then there's guys like Dan Huff, who, you know, are like just amazing, you know, in the Steve Lukather kind of vein.
Right.
But everybody we just talked about had their own sound, and it kind of circles back to your listener's question earlier about my thumbs, and it's hard to do this or that. You find a way to do it, and then you've got your own thing. And certainly all these guys, all the greats, they do that.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw a little 90-degree out here at you,
Okay.
Jerry. Are there any common pitfalls that you see musicians fall into when they're navigating the business side of the music industry?
Boy, the business side has changed so much. I think it's important to get paid for what you do. Okay. And it's one thing to work for your friend for maybe nothing, just to help him get going, because if it helps him rise, then that helps you rise. You're helping each other out. But there comes a time when you have to be real about getting paid for the work you do. It's very specialized work. You wouldn't be getting the call if you didn't have a reputation. Okay, so that which tells me you're needed, you're wanted, and you should be paid a fair wage for that. And I think the AFM sets a very fair wage for professional musicians. Again, if you're like a kid just getting out of college or high school or whatever, trying to make it, you do what you have to do, to meet people and work for free if you have to. But once you get to a certain point, you're working for people who are signed to a major publisher or a label or, somebody who's doing music for video games or whatever. There's a lot of money in those worlds. I'm talking billions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when I see people really at all levels jumping at the opportunity, I mean, I know we all have to eat. You do what you have to do, but we don't want to get ourselves into a situation where, he'll do it for $100. I'll do it for $90. Oh, well, I'll do it for $85. I'll do it for $75. And it's just a race to the bottom, and before you know it, nobody can earn a living wage, and in the meantime, the quality goes down too.
Yeah.
If you want the best players, you should be willing to pay for them. If you don't want the best players, okay, that's fine. Maybe you don't need the best players. Great. Good. I mean, young players have to grow up, have to come up somehow, and they need the lower paying gigs. The low budget demos, or the 6 people jump into a Kia Sonata and drive to St. Louis and do a gig, and after the gig, drive back to Nashville. We've all done that.
Yeah.
But there has to be a progression towards solvency and, financial solidity that a musician can work for. And it's up to all musicians to create and preserve that path.
How has streaming, Jerry, changed the landscape for session musician players and touring players?
In my experience, there's a lot more little one-off custom things where people are recording anywhere from 1 to 5 songs. There's a lot of EP things that are out there. And, the goal is to get some traction with streaming, which I don't often see. And when it does happen, I usually don't participate in the revenue stream. Right. However, there are those people who have done it when things, for whatever reason, really hit, and then they are in the revenue stream. Great for them. There's some, I know you'll agree with this. There's so much stuff, that music out there being, as they say, put out. Oh, I'm going to put it out. Man, it's like, why don't you just go down to the beach and spit in the ocean? I mean, there's so much music being put out every day. But still, somewhere in all of that is really good music that's going to float to the top and really be rewarding for the people who participate in it, or potentially rewarding.
Yeah. Mike Morris here is watching, and Mike mentions he spent a day in the studio and he learned volume swells. Also appreciate you taking the time to show me about recording with small amps and those new ZVEX effects you had just gotten. Totally inspired my playing, and Mike thanks you, Jerry.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
That was Thunder Canyon. That was the Thunder Canyon
about that
sessions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mike.
Great to see you, Mike. It's been a long time. I got to get over to the west a little bit, or you got to come a little further east for a show. So, well, getting back to that, Jerry, you've had this impressive, sustained career, and what's been the
Well, now
key?
let's put a pause in that for a second.
Yeah,
I mean, we could argue all day about how impressive my career is. It's impressive that I have survived. And here's what, people will ask me, and maybe you're getting ready to ask me, how did you do it? How did you manage to stay in this and be able to
stay relevant
and stay relevant and make a living? And my
Yep.
answer is simple. I was not smart enough to quit. That's all there is to it. Ride or die.
Yeah.
That's I was reading an interview with Vince Gill in Songwriter Magazine the other day. Vince left home when he was 18 and went off to play music, and I did too. And it was ride or die.
Burn the boats, huh? Burn the boats.
Yeah, learn by doing, and it wasn't always pretty, but
Yeah.
that's how you get here.
Yeah.
If you have a backup plan, you're going to use it. I'm
Right.
serious.
I've heard that from a lot of successful people that have been successful in their careers in music. There was no backup plan.
There you
This
go.
was it. Yeah. That's great advice, actually. Yeah.
Well, you have to be brave. You have to be bold. You have to be hard-headed, stubborn. Talent doesn't hurt. But yeah, I mean, let's face it. We who do this we're so blessed that we're doing something that we really love.
Yeah.
Like, and when I say love, I don't mean like a lot. I mean love, like the kind of love that almost transcends the kind of love you feel for a human. I mean, music is an incredible world to live in. It's an incredible thing to hold in your hands and to have a relationship with. I mean, it's not like, it's different from a relationship with people, of course, but yeah, it's a gift. It's a blessing.
I see some young musicians that it seems like they're talented sometimes, or they're, maybe they're making a few bucks, but Jerry, you just said something that's a key. You have to love it. It's gotta be all there is.
Yeah,
And,
kind of.
Yeah.
So there's only one way to find out.
That's right. So what's next for you? Do you have any new projects or, goals you're working on or working toward, or?
Well, I'm always trying to become a better musician and guitar player. I really am. It's fun for me. I mean, you think you get tired of being reminded day after day of how much you don't know and can't do. But for me, it's like I said earlier, it's innovating. It's inspiring to see and hear what can be done, the art of the possible on the guitar. And I don't expect it to. I don't like everything, but there are certain niches that I really love to dive into and explore. It just never ends.
Yeah.
Jerry, I tell you, your whole jazz deep dive into the jazz. I know I had a couple of pups here behind me going, being excited too. Dogs are so important.
Oh yeah.
Doggies are very important to our careers, I think,
I think so.
You got into the whole arranging, you studied arranging, jazz arranging, and how do you, I mean, I'm going to take a little bit of a deep dive. I know we're getting ready to wrap here, but how do you we talked about the complexity of some of the structure, the chord structures in jazz versus the contemporary and commercial music delivery. How do you view that when you have an option on some of these tracks potentially?
A little goes a long way.
Yeah.
You don't need to change. You certainly don't want to take anything out of its authentic kind of context. I mean, if it's, it's like one of my favorite country songs, "On the Other Hand" by Don Schlitz, and I forget who his co-writer was. You know, you're not going to add any kind of alterations to the chord in "On the Other Hand." It's a 3-chord country song. You might be able to put an interesting note somewhere, you know, but you don't have to dump your toolkit on the
Right.
just because you've got one. You know, you might reach in and you know, grab a little piece of this or a little bit of that, just to dab a color. But you know, sometimes you'll be in a situation where you can use more, or you'll get asked to write. Like I had a period where I was doing a lot of writing for film and TV, and then you get to just open up your toolbox, your Crayola box, and go nuts. But you know, in the context of day-to-day Music Row song making and hit making, it's, you know, how can you get the most bang out of the, you know, this little color here and maybe that little thing there that just makes something unique, gives it a flair or a personality. You don't have to think, you know what, we're going to make all these major 7 chords and we're going to blah, blah, blah. You're shooting yourself in the foot. That's just silly beyond belief, you know.
The triad is still king, huh?
Try it as king anyway, you know, period. You know, you can look at all the fancy chords you want to, and embedded in those fancy chords are layers of triads.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Awesome.
You know?
That's
Jerry, any parting words of wisdom for us? We've taken a lot of your time here tonight.
You know, for anybody out there who's listening who might be considering getting into the music business as a songwriter or a player or whatever, if it's what you love, then you ought to do it, you know. At least try it. I mean, I have friends who will come to me and say, you know, my son, my daughter, they really want to be a songwriter, or they really want to do this or that. And, you know, I tell them, hey, you know, let them do it. Let them go to this school or that school, or just let them hang out on Music Row and take a year or two. I took 4 years off between high school and finally going to college. But, you know, the point being that if somebody comes to Nashville or devotes a few years of their young life, they're 19, 20, 21, if they decide they don't like it, guess what? They're still young.
Yeah.
We forget that. If you come and you try to be in the music business and you get to 21 or 22, 23, and you think, this is just not for me. This is not what I thought it was going to be. Great. You had the experience and you've still got time to go to law school. Lots of time to go to law school or med school or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you really feel, if your heart is telling you, and if your skill set and your instincts are telling you that you got this, you have something to bring to this table in Nashville, not only are you doing yourself a disservice by not coming to that table, you're doing the world a disservice, because you might bring something life-changing to the table. So give it a try. Give it a try.
Yeah.
awesome.
That's a great way to it's a great message for your students, I'm sure. And I can see that you know, I do adjunct work, Jerry, too, and the students like the real world experience, don't they? They
do.
Yeah.
But they got to go get it for themselves. I can tell them stories all day, but you know, and I'm happy to steer them here or there, but they got to go do it.
Yeah. So, well, all right, my friend. You know, really appreciate you coming on and spending
thanks
time
for
with
having me.
us. Yeah, and I'm still pondering the question on your answering machine there when I called you, and I wouldn't even do it justice. I butcher it here. So, but love to kick that one around with you sometime.
Okay, we'll do it.
So, well, all right, Mark, any words of wisdom for us before we sign off here?
Well, Troy, as always, it's awesome being with you here on this show, and it's great to have Jerry in the house. Jerry, I miss seeing you, my friend. It's all, like you say, the business has changed so much, so there's all kinds of new and crazy ways to record, but it's just an honor and a pleasure having you on the show.
Well, thanks. Real quickly, I'll say to Troy's query about the answering machine message, the notion is if we're created in the image of a creator, then isn't there a mandate built into that for us to be creative? It's simple, you know?
Perfect.
We're going to have to leave that for the next show, I think.
Okay.
Jerry. Yeah, I've got to think about that one just a little bit more. So yeah,
The sequel, Jerry Kimbrough, the sequel.
Yeah, right. God forbid.
but you left me hanging there. I wasn't exactly sure how to answer the question when I was leaving the message for you this afternoon.
It's just something to think about, you know?
That's awesome. That's awesome. So thanks so much for joining in with us.
Thanks for having me.
Jerry Kimbrough, you are a gentleman and a real scholar. So
Amen.
we appreciate you being here with us, brother. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Y'all be well.
All right, Jer.